LinkedIn or through email or somehow. And if you ask me a question, I will anonymize it and create a video to share with everyone. But today, what we're going to be talking about is negotiation. And so I'm going to start by talking about what holds us back and why that shouldn't. And thanks to everyone who filled out the poll already. That was really great to see what is holding back some of you all who are listening today. Then I want to clarify a very important point, which is when are we negotiating and when aren't we? And, because in those other times we might want to use different strategies. And then the meat of this talk, which will be how do I actually do it? How can I kick butt in a negotiation? What are some things I can say? How can I go about this conversation? So without further ado, what holds us back? Some of the things, and this will be interesting to pair with what you all answered. Sometimes happiness holds people back because they think, wow, I got this great offer. It's for a lot of money. That's probably fine. And in the moment, we justifiably feel really happy to not be a candidate anymore because being a candidate is really, really hard. But maybe in a few months when you're talking with your coworkers, you might learn, wait, you got a signing bonus? Or, oh, that's how much you earn. As you learn more information, you might not feel as happy about it. So don't let happiness hold you back. We can still be strategic in these moments, even when we're really, happy about the situation. Socialization is another thing where some of us, we just don't have an opportunity to really learn how to negotiate. We don't develop that skill set. It maybe isn't even encouraged for a lot of people. Talking about money is taboo. Asking for more is taboo. So we just don't have those skills yet. But hopefully by the end of this talk, you'll be a little further in that journey. The third thing is fear. It can feel like maybe if I negotiate, if I'm too demanding, this offer might get rescinded. They might think I'm difficult, or my future manager, I might, mess up that relationship from the start. And just in my experience, having worked with dozens and dozens and dozens of, I don't know the exact number, I should figure that out, but having worked with a lot of people on negotiation, it is very, very rare for an offer to get rescinded because of negotiation. If you go about it the right way, if you're being polite and using some of the tactics I'm going to talk about, it's probably not going to happen. So, you might decide strategically to not negotiate very hard, but making a strategic decision is very different than not doing something out of fear. That's not a great position to be in. So I want to help you all be strategic, but not fearful. This kind of leads us into bullying, where sometimes there are recruiters or situations where we might be getting bullied, and that might change how we go about a negotiation. Sometimes recruiters will say, you have to accept this offer by tonight because I've got new people coming in tomorrow, and I can't guarantee I can hold this role open for you. And you might get some other sort of very aggressive language around things. And so again, how can you be strategic in those very difficult situations? But still, that doesn't mean you don't negotiate, right? Let's not let the bullies win. Number 5 is trust. Maybe you are working with a recruiter or a hiring manager and people who are really nice and they seem to really care about you and they're trying to do the right thing. As someone who's been a manager for a long time myself, I try to do the right thing for my candidates and employees. But that doesn't mean that my goals are 100% aligned with yours. And so part of negotiation is just sharing what you want and just advocating for yourself, because even people who mean well don't necessarily know what you want, or they might be working towards different goals that don't align. So with a negotiation, I can't guarantee that you're going to get everything that you ask for, but ideally you feel like, well, I got to ask all the questions I wanted to ask. I got to explore this offer. I got to fully explore these opportunities in front of me so that I could make a decision with the best opportunity possible. And, because you're starting a long-term relationship with a company when you accept an offer. So you want that relationship to get started on the right foot, on a foot that you feel good about. So how do we have that conversation? The sixth thing, which I'm going to talk about for a little bit, is sometimes people don't negotiate because they misunderstand when they're negotiating. Sometimes people will come to me and say, oh my gosh, is it too late? I already negotiated and now I don't know what to do. And then I sort of talk with them about it and I realize, wait, you haven't even finished interviewing. You're not negotiating until you get an offer. So, don't worry, that door's not closed. So let's go through a little bit about the 3 stages of being a candidate. at least this is how I break it down. The first stage is that you're applying to a job, and this could be sending in an application or cold, emailing people, I guess cold calling people, maybe reaching out to your network and doing some of that backdoor stuff, getting referrals, anything, even, talking with recruiters. That's when you're applying. And this is where people sometimes think, am I negotiating because of this recruiter or this application is asking me to say what my current salary is or what my salary or compensation expectations are. But that's not negotiating, because your primary goal when you're at this first step is to get to that second step, which is interviewing, or whatever the gates are where a company is evaluating you to see if you're a good fit. So that might be a code test or an interview or a presentation you have to give, whatever that is. That's everything you're doing when you're applying, is just trying to get your foot in the door so that you can show your skills, have those conversations, get that company to learn a ton about you so that they want to give you an offer. And then that is when you are negotiating. And just one thing here is that in a lot of tech companies, when you get an offer, it's often verbal. So the recruiter will often, or whoever you're talking with, they may not even tell you anything, even lightly in an email. You might just have a phone call and they're like, here's some of the highlights. What do you think? And it can be a very intense conversation, very stressful, but also quite short. And that is actually, I just want to clear the air here, because sometimes people say, hey, I had this conversation, but I really just want to negotiate in writing because that's going to be easier for me. And I'm like, yes, you could do that. The most effective time to negotiate is right then and there on the phone, in real time. Have that short conversation, have that back and forth. Use some of the language we're going to go through next. That is the most effective thing you can do, because once things get into a written offer, if you wait until you get a written offer, there's already been a lot of back and forth with leadership. If equity is involved, there's already been a lot of conversations, and it's not like you can't change things. If things are wrong, you can get them changed, but it takes more work. And part of negotiating is trying to make things easy for people. Hey, same thing when you're trying to ask for a raise, make it easy for your manager. So the most effective thing you can do is be prepared for that conversation. So let's go through how to do that. Yeah, when you're, I'm very proud of this animation. When you're applying to work somewhere and they ask for your comp expectations, your goal is still that you're trying to get interviews. We'll go through that. At the end, I have a couple little extra things, and we can go through if that's a question that y'all have, like, how do I answer salary expectations at the beginning of the process? We can go through some of my favorite phrases at the end of this. Feel free to put questions into the Whova application if you have a question Q&A, so we can get to that. And thanks for the people who have already done that. That's awesome. Okay, so before your conversation, so you're about to have this negotiation. You know it's coming up. You've gotten through most of the interviews, and you're expecting at some point to potentially get a phone call or a very light email or something where you're going to be having this conversation where they're going to say, hey, we're so happy for you to join. Everyone loved talking with you. I would like to give you an offer. It's going to look, salary is going to look about like this. How does that sound? And the recruiters kind of wants you to give a yes, no answer before they go and do a bunch of work. When you know that conversation is coming up, you need to figure out two numbers. One is your minimum. And I just realized I'm saying numbers. We're going to talk about salary for all of these examples, but you can apply all of this to other things that you care about, like how much PTO you get, how many days off you get, or whether you get a signing bonus and how big that is, or what kind of equity or stocks you get, anything that you could negotiate. Now, after you negotiate, then you decide whether or not to accept an offer. And if you have multiple offers, you might be deciding amongst things. And when you're making a decision, you consider the whole package. But for a negotiation conversation, the only things that are relevant are the things that you can negotiate. So healthcare, for example, usually a company, if they offer health insurance plans, it's just what they offer everyone. Like, the employees aren't negotiating special health insurance. Or same with 401k, with other kinds of benefits, that often those are just, that's just going to affect everyone or not. So you can't really negotiate on those. I just want to point out. That doesn't mean they're not relevant. If you currently have a 401k match and you're considering an offer for a place that doesn't have that match, you might use some of that information, when you're asking for an additional salary. You might say, maybe I could have extra 5,000, just, blah, blah, blah. But okay, so there's different things you care about. You're going to order them and talk about them one at a time. The recruiters often say, yeah, but consider the whole package. You will consider that when you make a decision. But when you're negotiating, you're just trying to figure out one thing at a time, and that's totally fine. And often the most important thing is salary. So that's a big lever in your life. It impacts a lot your bank account in a really big way. And of course, raises, promotions, a lot of things are based on your salary. So that's often the number one thing you're going to want to talk about. And then once you're finished talking about that, you can say, oh, let's move on to talking about a signing bonus or whatever your number two thing is, where maybe if you didn't get everything in number one, that can help boost you in your second or third thing. And so, okay, so we're going to be talking about salary here for the purposes of this example. And so you want two numbers for the thing that is important to you in this moment. This is salary. Two numbers. One is minimum. That's what you would accept. You would work somewhere for this minimum salary. Below that, you would walk away. So it's a pretty serious number. You don't want that company to know this number if possible. The next number you want is your happy number. This is, oh my gosh, I wouldn't have to think twice to work here. I'd be thrilled. If they offer you something between your happy and minimum, you might be a little disappointed, but you'd accept the job. You'd get over it. It'd be fine. So those are your two numbers, and you want to know them because this conversation, this negotiation, it can be really stressful, and you don't want to be doing too much thinking on the spot. It's already hard enough to improv the conversation. So you want to have those two numbers figured out, and that gives us three scenarios to go through. What if the offer is above your happy number? What if it's in the middle? What if it's below your minimum? So that's what we're going to go through. So regardless of the scenario that you're in, first thing you say whenever recruiter, or whomever is telling you that you have an offer and you're able to chat with them in real time, because again, trying to do a negotiation through text, it's just too slow. That can make you seem difficult if you're listing all these bullet points. Just have this as a phone call, and the first thing you want to say is, wow, thank you. I'm thrilled to receive this offer. I'm so happy. I really enjoyed meeting everyone. I'm so excited about working at Money Corps, whatever. Like, be authentic to yourself. This is really awesome that they're giving you an offer. Be positive. In pop culture, a lot of times negotiations, it's almost like, you can almost think that you're supposed to be cagey, like don't give things away. Don't let them know that you're happy. Don't do that for employment. Everyone throughout this whole process, when you're a candidate, everyone you talk to at the company, they will do more work for you. They will be more excited about you if they think that they're your number one choice. Like, the more excited you are to go work somewhere, the more they'll be excited. And so if you don't want them to ghost you, don't ghost them. Be very communicative, be very happy about things. So you say this positive thing, but just because you're happy doesn't mean that you're making a decision, right? So now how do we negotiate? Let's start with the first scenario. That's the awesomest one, where they've exceeded your expectations. And this is great, but maybe your expectations were really low because maybe you were having a hard time figuring out what the market was. You didn't talk to enough people who are earning more than you for you to know that you should reset your expectations. Or maybe you're just not sure, right? Like, this could be they could have offered you the biggest salary that anyone in the whole company is earning, but you don't know that until you explore the situation, right? So how do you explore it in a low risk way? You don't want to introduce too much risk. My favorite question to ask in those cases, if you really are trying to minimize risk, is, hey, is there room to negotiate? Is this offer negotiable? And sometimes they'll say, no, you're earning the most of anyone. You're at the top of your bracket. We can't go any higher. We just really want you to work here. Or no one gets to negotiate. We don't do that. Sorry. And in which case you can be like, oh, great, thanks. That sounds fine. Let's talk about a signing bonus or whatever your number two thing is. And you can move forward in that way. The other thing they could say, it'd be really nice if they were like, yeah, actually, we are open to negotiation. On my sheet here, I can offer you up to $10,000 more. They're not going to say that. They've been around this block before, although that's really what you want to know. What they'll probably say is, yeah, sure. What were you thinking? They'll always turn it back around on you. And so ideally, you would come prepared with a number. So there's a kind of a third number you might want to have prepared, which is, how much would you add to their offer if it's above your happy point? So they offered you $165,000. Maybe you'd say, well, I was thinking closer to 170,000. Is that possible? So you just put something out there. You have being specific about what you want is really important. So I maybe have glossed over that, but getting specific numbers, knowing what your happy number is, like making a specific request. Also, when you're asking for a raise, that can be helpful too. A lot of times people say, don't say the first number, that sort of thing. That's based on this theory of anchoring. So whoever says the first number anchors the conversation. And if things are, all over the place and you don't want to inadvertently anchor things low, which is why people will say, don't say the first number in a negotiation. But it doesn't actually matter who says the first number. If the company anchors you low because they think you're not very senior or whatever, that's not great either. So especially if you've done your research, anchoring high is not necessarily a bad thing. That's, maybe more for salary expectations. Sometimes that can happen at different points. After an offer or before interviews, right? But anyway, when you are actually negotiating, now's the time to get specific because you're trying to work out details. You're not trying to wait for them to magically do the right thing for you or no, they're just recruiters or hiring managers, whoever's giving you the offer, they talk about numbers all the time. They have to go and, say specific numbers higher up. So you want to say something specific. So you could just basically, is this offer negotiable? Oh, what were you thinking? Maybe something like this. And then whatever they say to that, sure, that sounds good. Or I'll go talk to my manager, or maybe we could do half of that. Whatever they say, you're just like, great, thank you so much. That sounds awesome. Now let's talk about a signing bonus. So that's a very low risk thing that you can do. Oh, here's another phrase. I like round numbers. We round up to 170,000. This has worked multiple times. So I know this sounds really funny, but sometimes a bit of levity, I guess, works. And really what this kind of shows is that you don't have to explain everything. You're not trying to persuade someone. You're just asking, hey, is this possible? So when you get an offer, you don't want to say bad things about it because you don't want it to get taken away. You're just like, thanks, this is great. I'm thrilled. Hey, look over here. What about this? And then that's what you're going to have, this very short kind of conversation about, hey, what's possible? Can we figure something out? So let's move on to scenario 2. This is the meat of things, or this is the situation we're often in where, okay, we have an offer. It's acceptable, right? Hey, it's above our minimum. That's not bad. But hey, can we make it go a little higher? How do we negotiate? So what are some, I want to share some phrases that you can say here and you find what works for you. And I'm giving general advice if you're in a specific situation, especially if you're trying to, one of the best negotiation tactics is just getting leveled correctly. If you're being seen as a level 2 software engineer and you're trying to be seen as a tech lead, that there's a mismatch there of just about what's possible. And so sometimes you kind of have to work harder at that, that component. But within where you're at, what can you say just to get the numbers moved up? I'd love to join, but I'm looking at roles around 165,000. That's a great phrase. I'm looking for a competitive offer. And for me, that's an offer in the region of 165,000. That's a great, just to jump the gun again, if someone's asking you for what you're looking for very early in the process, you say, I'm looking for a competitive offer. That's a great answer. I'm still doing my research, but that's, this is what I'm interested in. And wait till you get an offer to then talk about numbers. Other roles I'm looking at seem to be closer to 165,000. Is there any way we can get close to that? It's a really great question to add on, right? Again, it lowers the risk. I mean, it makes it less of a demand where, hey, if you can't meet this, I'm out of here, because you maybe don't want that level of risk until you talk with them and see what's possible, right? So is there any way we can get close to that? It's a great question. And note, you never want to lie in an interview process, and you never want to make it seem like you have all these other great offers. Hey, Microsoft gave me an offer, so like you should be giving me one, or you should be improving this. You definitely don't want to say that if you don't have an offer from Microsoft, right? And you also don't want to make it sound like they're sloppy seconds. I think that makes companies less excited, right? So you want that company to know they're your number one, figure out authentically within yourself how, how you can be that excited about this company, because you kind of want every company that you're talking with to be in some way they're a number one, right? When you're talking with them. You don't want to lie, but you want to contain multitudes and shine the light strategically. Yeah, so you want the company to know that you're really excited about them, but that here's what you're looking at in your conversations with other recruiters and the research you're doing. If you actually have other offers, you can even say, I would really like to work with you all, but this other company has offered me a package that's $20,000 bigger. Can you make this an easier decision for me? Is there any way you can get closer to that? That sort of thing. This is a great answer, especially when there is sort of that leveling type of ambiguity that maybe has come up or that's changed through the interview process. Given the responsibilities of this role, I think that something around 165,000 would be a fair market rate. Especially if maybe you've been talking with the hiring manager about this being a management track and the recruiter maybe didn't, realize that was happening. Or if there's other responsibilities have been introduced into the role. Maybe you're really good at interviewing, or you have some cybersecurity expertise. Maybe that's worth something to a company, that you can come in with some kind of leadership or expertise that might help move things up, even if the title doesn't change. This is a phrase. I introduced these sentences to give an example of something that can work, but I think that there has some negative impact here. So the first is, that's a little lower than I was expecting. Whoops. That's a little lower than I was expecting. I think that's great to assert that. I think you're being very honest. That's lower than you're expecting. What you don't want to say is, this is unacceptable. You don't want them to sound like, hey, their initial offer, which might be the best they could do for, for their own reasons that have nothing to do with you. You don't want them to think that you're saying no to an offer that you could say yes to, that you want to keep that on the table. Can we meet in the middle, right? That's classic negotiation. And so that's sort of, a lot of times when we think of negotiating, that's what we think of. People just keep splitting the difference, right? I want to put a better question in your mind, something that I want you to practice saying and then like brushing your teeth, so that you're quiet and giving them a chance to answer. Because sometimes when we're nervous, we just keep talking, right? We undermine what we're trying to ask or say. How high can you go? That's what we really want to know. You say, hey, can you get closer to 165,000? They say, we can't go that high. Well, how high can you go? Because that's what we're trying to do here. So sometimes recruiters will get really honest with you about this, and then you can know that you are getting the best opportunity, the best offer that you could get. So give this a try. Let me know how it goes if you say this. I don't think there's any shame in honestly asking this, right? It kind of, honestly, it opens the door for this honest conversation for them to share with you how things work, how they figure out compensation and levels and all of that. So before we move on to the last scenario, I do want to give a little caveat to scenario 2, which is, suppose that your offer is above the minimum. In this case, it is the minimum, or maybe it's a little above it. But there's cases where the happy number and the minimum are quite far apart. There's certain roles. DevOps used to be like this, and maybe still is. Developer relations is definitely like this, where there are some roles where you're going to look at market data and even accounting for geography and company size and all the things that make every data point a unique snowflake. Even when you account for that, it's just like a big wide swath of like what you could be expecting. And so your minimum and your happy number might be quite far apart. In this case, you are not trying to negotiate this 120,000 offer all the way up to 180 necessarily. I have actually seen this exact thing happen, 120 to 180. So specifics can matter, but often in this case, if they were to give you this offer 120 and you were to say, you know what, I'm looking at offers around 180, the recruiter there, the person you're speaking with, they might say, wow, well, it looks like we're not going to find a fit. So thanks very much for your time. You don't want to close the conversation too soon. So what you might need to do is just reset your happy number to 20,000 above whatever that offer is, and negotiate up from there. Say, oh, thank you for this offer, but you know what, I'm looking at offers around 140. Would that be possible? So you might just kind of in the moment decide to do that. Cool. And thanks for putting in the questions, y'all. And for this case, by the way, he'd use all the same phrases that we've covered before. I just wanted to put in this caveat. Now let's talk about the end game, because, and the reason I'm not talking about scenario 3, where the offer is below your minimum, is because even if it is below your minimum here, hey, maybe the offer is 110, but you use some of these phrases, you get it above 120, like that's great. Or maybe you don't. So what we're really talking about is at the end game of this short, ultimately it is a short conversation at the end of the day. Often, you know, because there's only so many times you can go back and forth, right? But at the end of that, where are you at? You know, are you still in above or below the minimum, et cetera? So what do you say? Because maybe the offer is 120, you've been trying to negotiate to 140. You didn't, you know, the recruiter wasn't like, yep, great, let's do it. You know, sometimes things end where they're like, yeah, I'm not sure we can do that, or I need to go talk to someone, or they might even say that's not possible and we don't make exceptions. And the number of times I've seen exceptions make me definitely want to leave the door open, because there are exceptions. They happen all the time. If they're going to happen, why not you? It's not great that that's what exists in the world, but hey, let's leave the door open for it, right? So how do you wrap up that conversation where you want to leave the door open, but you would also accept this offer, right? Some things you can say: what we've talked about sounds great. I'm excited to join, pending review of the details in the written offer. And you can use this even for that first scenario where they've given you this amazing offer. There's no shame in accepting verbally. I would definitely, you know, let them know how much you were really excited about this. But, you know, you might still say, you know, I'll just review the details in the written offer. Some people I've talked to have been concerned that the verbal and written won't match. That would probably just be like an accidental mistake. I mean, you should always look things over. And sometimes there's details that you need to figure out. Oh, I have a side business, or, you know, there's like maybe some different clauses and things. Whereas this verbal conversation, it's just for those big numbers: offer, you know, the salary, maybe PTO, signing bonus, those sorts of things. So another thing you can say is, hey, it's not my policy to make big life decisions it's not my policy to make big life-changing decisions without sleeping on it first. So, and by the way, if that's not your policy, just go ahead and make it your policy right now. So you can say this so that you don't feel pressured to accept an awesome offer immediately. So you give yourself 24, 48 hours. If you are really excited about this company, I would definitely say do communicate with that recruiter within 1 or 2 days, or, you know, 3 days if there's a weekend, but be communicating with them closely. I think a separate issue is, what if you're trying to slow them down while you interview elsewhere? Generally, I would say speed up those other places. It's weird. It can be a bit weird to try to slow someone down when you're saying, hey, I'm really excited to work with y'all. You're my number one company. Then it's kind of like, well, why aren't you accepting? Are we really your sloppy seconds? So it kind of depends on how that conversation is happening with companies, how upfront you're being about being in multiple interview, you know, processes, candidacies. But sleeping on stuff, that's always fine. Discussing it with your family, that's always fine. You know, so those are nice ways to give yourself more time, and it gives them a couple more days for them to find an exception, or for them to go talk with someone. If the recruiter said, hey, I will go, and if they've explicitly said, I'm going to go talk to someone about this ask, you can end the conversation saying, this looks great. I'm so excited. I look forward to hearing back from the VP of engineering, you know, about what, you know, whether this new offer would be possible, or, you know, what that could look like. And definitely reach out to them in a day or two if you don't hear back. But they're excited about hiring you too. So they're going to be reaching out to you as well. This is something you can say to be more explicit, to sort of needle them a little bit more, to make it seem like, look, I'm going to be thinking about this, and if you can sweeten this for me in the meantime, that'll help. So this role is at the top of my list, but I'll need to think about 120,000 and get back to you tomorrow. So you can kind of, you know, I'm trying with these phrases to not introduce too much risk, but I've mentioned that a lot, this idea of risk. So actually, let's look at ways that you can introduce risk and why you would want to do that. And one of those is because maybe the offer has ended below your minimum. And so, at the end of this conversation, that you're not going to accept this. And if you just end this conversation with the recruiter saying, well, I'm just going to, thanks a lot. This is exciting. I'm going to go think about this and I'll get back to you tomorrow. The recruiter might be thinking, great, I look forward to hearing what you say. I hope it's a yes. They're going to go have a great night's sleep. You can't end the conversation. If you're going to say no, don't end the conversation without making sure the other party knows that as well. So they can work with you on, changing that, right? And so what you might want to say is, I would love to join, but I can't at that number. And it's because, assuming that you've already had this conversation where you've been asking for more and they've been saying no, now is a fine time to say your minimum and to be like, I'm looking for a role that's I forget now what we've been doing in this example, 130,000, so something like that. And we've glossed over a little bit of some of the intricacies here. Here, I'll show you another phrase that I really like. I'm really excited about this role, but X doesn't work for me. This is a great generalized phrase to use in other, in other parts of your life, especially as an employee. Letting someone know that these responsibilities or the situation doesn't work for you is a polite but strong way to say, hey, we need to discuss this and we need to figure out something else. This is important, like pay attention. And so we've glossed over a little bit of how maybe you can't, in this case, with say the offer being 5,000 short of your minimum, potentially, this is where the sort of things get a little more complicated. What if they gave you an extra 5,000 as a signing bonus? Because, a salary is a commitment every year and things are based on salary, but a bonus, one and done. And so companies have cash. Sometimes it's easier for them to just give bonuses. It's not as great, for you, it's going to go away, for raises. Like, you're not going to get it in future years. If this is a longer term commitment, like the company's not making a long-term commitment to you. You get taxed at bonuses at a different rate. There's different things to consider. But maybe there's other ways you can make this work with signing bonuses or equity. For startups, startups are a whole situation when you're trying to figure out how, they often maybe don't have cash, or they don't want to have commitments hanging over them for raising money. So you're trying to sort of figure out different things. Anyhow, so things can be a little more complicated is what I'm saying, but for the purposes of this example, I hope this was helpful. These are the phrases that I really like, and that can be useful based on which scenario you're in. What I want to address next is how to talk about past and future compensation. And I see that came up in the questions as well. So I'm just going to take a couple seconds to read through the questions, and y'all can think about, please write in more if I've missed something. Ooh, these are good. These are really good. Okay. Okay, well, I'm going to go through the rest of these slides and then pick up on any question that I don't have addressed here. So talking about past and future compensation, this is early in the process. I have a video on this. 3 phrases to keep your current salary a secret. The main thing here, so there's 2 things, right? One is how to keep your current salary or your past salary a secret. There's a separate thing, which is how to talk about your expectations and what you want. That is a totally reasonable part of a hiring process. At the beginning of an interview of a candidacy, the company wants to know that they're not wasting their time with you, that your expectations aren't wildly out of sync. And to some extent, you want to know that too, right? Depending on your situation. So that's quite reasonable to try to loosely talk about expectations early in the process, even though that's not a negotiation. But talking about past compensation really sucks. In fact, it's illegal in some states. And there's this link, you can click on this link to find out for where you're working, what the rules are about, some states, companies can't ask you about your past compensation. And they also have to provide the range of salary for the role once you're, a candidate having this conversation at all. And so here's some things you can say if companies are asking you about your past compensation and it's in a conversation like with a recruiter. You can say things like, first of all, turn it around on them. Oh, sorry. No, I was getting ahead of myself. Sorry, for past compensation, something you can say is, my contract doesn't allow me to share that externally. So I'd prefer not to, because it's important to me that I keep my word. And you should, you can go and look at your current employee contract, or your past one. It's very common for companies to not want you to share your compensation outside the company. You're actually allowed to share it internally. There's more links in this video to like nice laws around that. But so again, you don't want to lie, but your employee contract probably is not, you're probably not supposed to share it externally. So you can rely on that. You can also just say, you know what, I'm really uncomfortable sharing that. I think I might not be, I think I'm not supposed to do that. I'm not sure, but I do know that I'm really excited to work for y'all. And I'd really love to get an interview. Can we put a pin in this and move forward, and we'll circle back. You can sort of basically just say like, I'm uncomfortable right now. Can I get back to you? But then like never get back to them about what you currently earn, because you don't want to share that. If it's an application, sometimes you can put like $1, put something where it's clear you're obviously not lying, but you're not giving them the information they want. You're just putting in a number to move that application forward. Sometimes you might reveal your past compensation because you just have to, and that's the situation you're in, and that's because their application process or whatever, their recruiters are relentless, and that's we can only be strategic for the individual situations that we're in. And so it might be strategic to just go ahead and do that. If you're earning, there's like a reverse of this where you feel like I've been earning a ton and now I'm trying to switch careers a little bit and I don't want to be disqualified. There's sort of different ways to handle that. Ideally, whenever you can put things in your cover letter, but ideally you have a conversation with a recruiter, because what you can then try to do is, regardless of what they're asking, if they're asking about past compensation, you can try to move the conversation to future, because that's what's more relevant. That's what they should be asking anyway. But even then, you don't want to give a number at this point either. What you might do is turn it around on them and say, well, what is the range for this role? Like basically, what should my expectations be? What do you offer? And they might say, oh, for this level, that we usually pay 120 to 140,000 a year for the base pay. And then you might say, great, I'm looking at roles around 140. Just pick the top number and go with it. Is one option. Or even better is to say, I'm looking for competitive. I'm looking for a competitive salary. I'm still doing research about the market, but yeah, around 140, that sounds fine. You're basically just trying to say, I'm really excited to work here. Let's do those interviews. Once you get to the negotiation, once you get an offer, let's say you feel like you shot yourself in the foot. You had a really low number when you talked to that recruiter originally, and you're really worried about that. You're like, I now know that I want to be asking for more. My happy number is a lot higher than that. What do I say? How do I bring it up? And, and ideally they give you an offer first. Some companies will ask you about your expectations again, once they're giving you the offer, and you're like, oh, okay. But one thing you can do if things have changed since then, you gave a number, you feel like, oh no, I shot myself in the foot. What do I do? You can say, you know what, I've been learning. Because basically, first of all, they've learned a ton about you. All those interviews that you wowed them on makes them want to hire you and give you this offer. They've been learning about you. And so, maybe they're what they're willing to pay has gone up. And equally, you've been learning about the market. You've been talking with other recruiters, other companies. And so you can just say, I've done more research and I've talked with more companies. And at this point, based on what I've learned, this is what I'm looking for. Like, you don't have to feel bad about your expectations changing as you learn information too, right? They weren't going to give you an offer until they did interviews. So, their ideas also change when they learn stuff. So that's my advice around that. Probably enough on that. Oh, I forgot I had actual slides that would say some of these bullet points. Well, here you go. Those are the sentences that I said. All right, let's move on to, I guess I'm going to address one more issue, negotiate a raise, and then I'll address some of these other questions. I know some of these have come up in the questions. I just want to say negotiate a raise is I guess oxymoron. No, what is it? One of those, yeah, is that one a phrase? Does it make sense? You can't negotiate a raise. You can't truly negotiate as an employee. You just don't have leverage anymore. You have leverage when you're not an employee, but once you sign that contract, your manager will assign work to you and give you performance reviews and make decisions that you don't get to re-sign a contract. It's just what happens is just based on the strength of your relationship and the company policies and, all of these sort of less tangible factors. So you're never really negotiating once you're an employee. But what you can do is try to have a really good relationship with your manager, and hopefully if they're also set up to succeed, you can have a really nice growth trajectory. But if you're in a bad situation, you kind of have to negotiate with your feet, either changing teams or departments or potentially changing companies. So I have a video on this too. But my main tip for this conversation as a manager who has often asked my reports to please everyone ask for a raise. As much as I have good intentions, the squeaky wheel gets the oil. So even when I'm trying to do the right thing, honestly, a lot of my male reports are the ones asking for raises, and they'll get more of my attention even when I'm really trying to advocate for some of my shyer reports who I think are really great, but not advocating for themselves. But here's what I recommend people do, which is to have a list of bullets that you give your manager to say, here's why I'd like a raise. And ideally you have a job description for your current job, you have a job description for the next rung up, especially if often the best way to get a raise is to get a promotion, because that'll be a really big jump. If you're at the bottom of your pay bracket, you're probably getting raises, but once you get past about midway, start looking for that promotion, because that's really going to give you that big jump. And so have bullets, give your manager fodder, because as a manager, often what I have to do is go convince my manager. And when I'm doing a performance review, it's way too late. So ask sooner. I don't know if I have that as a bullet point. No, but look, here's the thing. People often wait until they've received a performance review to then say, great, see how awesome I'm doing. Will you give me a raise? That's like months too late. There is no shame in your first day on the job of a new job, talking with your manager. Hey, how do things work here? How do, what am I working towards, a raise or a promotion? What does that look like? How do performance reviews work? How does comp adjustment work? There's no shame in being curious about how things work, right? Managers often like to talk about that and share things. And that kind of makes it seem that you're not just like in it for the money. You just want to be successful, and you want to grow and have a bigger impact at the organization. You want to advance your career. But that also, what I'm trying to get at is, basically, let's say you have not been talking about this with your manager. You get a performance review. The manager has already decided, like often, like even like, 2 months in advance, we're already talking about like who's going to get, we're already talking about our reports and who's going to get what. Like sometimes when I'm getting someone promoted, I've been talking with my peers and my manager for like months. Like they've been seeing this person's success, for the last 6 months. Everyone's on board with like, yes, this person's definitely they're on the rise potentially. So if your manager hasn't been thinking about you and advocating on your behalf because you were making things a little too easy for them, and you sort of ask for a raise in that moment, and they're like, I can't do anything. Like I have no budget now. We already allocated everything, or these positions all got filled. Worst case, this is, at least in this case, the situation here, the worst case is that you can make a plan. Okay, I can't give you a raise right now, but we have performance reviews again in 6 months or in a year. So we'll make a plan. We'll check in every month so that, that you're on track. So that's what I recommend doing. And, it's a chance for your manager to be real with you. Maybe they're like, oh, you're a software developer level 5. Like you're not going to get promotions every year. You're not, actually this is what it's going to look like. So, you can at least get on the same page. And if that doesn't work for you, you can try to get leverage, which is to get other offers. And you probably want to know where you work. If, some managers or companies, they hear that you're interviewing elsewhere and they're like, whoa, you're disloyal. You're dead to me. I will now give the good projects to someone else. Like that might be quite bad. At some startups, I wouldn't necessarily tell my manager I'm leaving until I've got a signed offer, because maybe they'd, fire me that day. Like some companies, some states are at will employment. On the other hand, there's some companies where even the manager will say, yeah, you are really underpaid. Like your peers who have been here 10 years less than you are earning, $40,000 more. This is a bad situation, but I can't fix it. We don't have policies to fix it. That person comes back with an offer for $40,000 more, and the manager's like, great, like I can sign that today. we can meet outside offers to keep people. So that's like two wrongs making, I don't know if I can say that makes things right, but so knowing how things truly work can be helpful. But if I, in a non-cynical way, as an employee, it's not a bad idea to every so often, especially if you're unhappy, to go talk to your network, find out information. Maybe you do even do some interviews. Maybe you do even try and get an offer, just to see where the market is at, just to learn. You're not trying to take advantage of these companies that you're not really going to join. But like, if you have a little bit of this open mind, this curiosity, where you're like, maybe I could learn about this and it would be a great fit, I don't think any company would be unhappy with that. It's a learning process for everyone, right? And so, and sometimes, going out and trying to find other work, sometimes that's awesome. And you realize, whoa, because a lot of people are in bad situations for too long because they kind of feel like, oh, this is my only option. And so, that can be nice to really help move things forward for everybody, for you and the company in good ways, if you end up finding a better option elsewhere. But also sometimes you're like, man, I actually have a really great job, or I actually am earning like a good amount that I can't find a better, I can't find a better pay or better whatever, elsewhere. And maybe that makes you feel better about where you're at. So be careful finding leverage elsewhere, but don't be afraid to. Okay, that is everything I have in the slides. Thanks everyone for listening. I am going to go through these questions now for the next 5 minutes. Can you talk about, oh yeah, negotiation and promotions, like asking for a raise? So I think we just did that. When you get that expected role, how to talk about compensation? Yeah, like just bring it up directly and say, this is what I'm looking for. Can we make this, just be specific. So it's going to look a little bit different than a negotiation when you're internal, because you're not like, you don't have leverage. You're not like, I'm going to, don't, what, you kind of just have to accept what happens, but like have a direct conversation with your manager. Give your manager bullets, give your manager numbers, tell your manager, this is what I'd like. You don't make it an ultimatum. It has to happen right now. But yeah, tell them what you want to work towards, and enlist their help in you getting there. I will say, don't give everything up in the sense that a lot of times companies make promises and then don't deliver. So sometimes you have to say, this is really important to me right now. Like, I don't want to be taking on this new role without compensation to match. That's really important to me. Like, how can we do that now? Not like 6 months from now, which turns into, 3 years or whatever. How do you know how much you are worth in order to better negotiate things like raises? Well, first of all, you're a GD human, and your worth has nothing to do with how much companies pay you. But that said, I know what you mean. First of all, what people are paid is not so directly related to things you are doing. You want to earn more, go work for a company that makes a lot of money, because they're going to pay their employees a lot of money, right? There's people working at amazing nonprofits and they're individually doing amazing things, and they're not, they very seldomly can negotiate for more. So at the end of the day, what people are paid is not based on what their contributions are. It doesn't hurt. Having good contributions and a good reputation can definitely help. Go do those things. But yeah, what you're worth is just, in terms of what you can ask for, is just what you ask for. It's just about being strategic. And honestly, the more you are talking with recruiters and interviewing at companies and getting offers, getting offers is going to tell you how much people will pay for you. So the more doors you can open, the more opportunities you can have, the more you can play them off each other, or just the more knowledge you will have. But even just talking with recruiters can be quite helpful, because recruiters will tell you what, where things are at in their companies, or talking to your network, just having peers at places. If, companies do backdoor reference checks when they're hiring a candidate. You give references, but hey, if I know someone who used to work with you, I might go ask them what that was like, backdoor reference. And you can do backdoor references in the same way. Like, oh, you got an offer from Netflix. Well, can you find someone who works at Netflix to just ask them, like, hey, maybe not exactly what they earn, although, hey, if they're willing to share that, that's cool. But you can just ask them, hey, how do things work? Are there signing bonuses? What are the pay ranges? You can, anyway, try to get information is really helpful. I think going to people is the best way. There's tons of resources online, levels.fyi, Glassdoor. There's data sets, join Slack communities for your niche. Like, there's a really great developer relations Slack community where people share information that I find helpful being in DevRel. But so, you can find data sets. It's not a bad thing, but I like to just talk to people. and just try to get offers. And don't be afraid to ask for what's possible. At the end of the day, you'll notice I was never giving you phrases that are like, and now give your, 5-point thesis on why objectively you deserve whatever. It's all made up. I mean, like for everybody, like money, value is all, it's not logical. How to negotiate with your leaders without sounding too demanding, and how to influence their decisions while negotiating. Hopefully these phrases will work for you. Let me know how it goes. Hopefully this mindset of being polite but assertive, and sort of asserting things and then asking questions, hopefully that works for you. I'd love to know. How would you recommend changing these negotiating tactics when it's an internal position that one is interviewing for? Well, so this is interesting. If you're like doing formal interviews, to some extent, that also means that maybe they are going to give you like, it's very easy for companies to want to move too fast and to not give you a chance to negotiate, even if you're external, certainly if you're internal, right? Because they're just like, oh, don't you want this job? You're going to, like they might not think of it as formally as you accepting it, but I think you just politely say, you just politely don't give a yes, no decision. You give your enthusiasm, but you ask for the details. And you might more specifically, you might be able to get more specific internally, especially with your current manager or that new manager, about what you're looking for, what the comp changes would be. There is no shame in changing positions and caring about what you're paid. Like that is a very legitimate part of a career, is that we get paid. Like there's a contract with our companies. So there's no shame in, yes, you want to have a bigger impact. You want to grow your career. You want to have new, different work responsibilities. That is all good. And it's fair to just want to know how you will be compensated. There's work that I will not do, if I'm doing engineering work versus giving presentations, my compensation desires change. So being reassigned, certainly, yeah, things aren't fungible. So just have that conversation, do the best you can. There's situations where you just, as an employee, you fundamentally don't have as much power. So if you have a specific situation, maybe send me an email so I can give better advice. I know we're about at time. I'm going to go a couple more minutes, and if that's okay.
Sure, that's okay.
Yeah. Okay. I think we're actually near the end of the questions. So what kind of mindset can I nourish so I can be more comfortable asking for a raise and job offer, benefits, etc.? Just that everyone gets to ask about these things and everyone gets to care about it, and you can too. It's just a skill set. I hope these phrases work for you. Make them your own. But it's like you go through the interview process and you have your interviewer is trying to be curious and learn about you. And now once you get that offer, the tables turn, like completely they turn. And now you get to be the curious one, and you're trying to learn about this offer, this opportunity, the work-life balance, the compensation. You just get to be curious. You're trying to ask all those questions before you accept, and also ask for things that you want. So hopefully that mindset helps you. How do I ask for a raise or promotion when I'm already performing at the next level and above my peers, but my company only does promotions on a yearly basis? Yeah, that's a good question. So companies can have sort of in-cycle and out-of-cycle comp changes. And this is a difficult question because it really depends on the company. They are more likely to do an out-of-cycle change when it's like when they need to fix something, like, oh, we were underpaying you, oh, you're like earning $20,000 less than your male peer. That's a problem. We're going to fix that right now. And it's not even based on performance. It's just like a comp correction almost. I've seen those happen more often out of cycle. Whereas for performance changes, those will usually happen on cycle. But I will say, basically, just ask, like the sooner the better. You don't care what their cycles are. Like you don't have to care how the thing gets solved. I mean, you're trying to partner with your manager, but like that's their problem to solve. It's the same when people are like, hey, can I still negotiate if my company is having tough financial times? And it's like, yeah, you're not trying to solve their budgeting issues, but I can tell you that you asking for $5,000 or $10,000 more is totally fine, and probably not at the same scale of like budget issues for companies. Like that's like nothing money. but it's really big money for you, right? So you don't have to solve those problems. I would just say, you just have to say, hey, make sure you talk with your manager. Hey, this is what's happening. I think I'm performing at this level, and I'd really like to get that compensation to match. It looks like that's not going to happen for another, what would you say, on a yearly basis? It's not going to happen for another 8 months. Hey, can we get this fixed sooner? If it was like only a month or two away, sometimes companies will like back do compensation. You can ask about that sometimes. Like they'll give you a raise, but it'll like be effective like 2 months prior and stuff. Sometimes they'll do that. But yeah, I would just say, yeah, how do you you just got to ask and see what they can do, and just let them know this is really important to you. And try to make it sound like, because if your manager is immediately like, yeah, we can't do it. Like, I don't know how to do that. Try to have a brainstorm with them, like where you creatively think about what would be possible. But, another way to approach that is, I mean, maybe this is starting to get petty. Like maybe could you not have some of those responsibilities? Yeah, I don't know. That might be like a step backwards. Kind of depends on how desperate you are. I get like, are you happy and you just want more compensation, or are you just like, well, this is not working for me? A lot of times getting promotions or getting raises can sometimes be easier externally. It's true. Sometimes moving companies, if you're actually changing your title, sometimes that's easier to do internally, because, other companies often like to make hiring decisions based on people already doing the work that they want. So I'll move on. I missed, I believe these slides, I've uploaded them, and you'll be able to access a recording of this after this talk. Cool. And I think I've answered the one about what to do when required to provide a salary just to apply. So there's some tips there, and a video that goes into a little bit more detail. What if you're in the final stages of one role and another role you're interested in is still a couple of weeks out to get a final decision? Speed that one up. You can kind of try to slow down the first one you're in, but it's really hard to. Sometimes, like with some of the big software companies, Facebook, Amazon, Google, like their processes take a long time. They're always hiring. They know you're interviewing at other places, and like sometimes you can just sort of have multiple. I've even worked with someone who ended up getting basically 2 offers because one of the and now I'm like, I don't know if I want to name names, but one of the big fangs was like, yeah, you can start with us in a year and a half. So he's like, cool, I'm gonna go work at this other fang for like a year and then come, to this other company, almost like a year, like a year abroad. So sometimes that's, you can talk about it, but often I would just say, try and speed up the other company. Say, hey, look, this is where I'm at with this other company, but I really want to work for y'all. Is there anything we can do to speed up these interviews? That's how I would try to work on that alignment. If you have more questions, please send me a message on LinkedIn. You can email me at, I just realized, don't go to dangormendel.com. That's old. Just go to candidateplanet.com or email me at lusen@candidateplanet.com. And I would love to answer your question. I definitely would love to make videos that kind of anonymize the details, but give you real interview feedback. I'm doing a series right now. If you share your interviews with me, I will, information about them, I will tell you what the interviewer is really looking for and what you can do better next time. And I'm happy to answer specific negotiation situations. So thank you so much for having me on this awesome conference, and enjoy the rest of it. Good luck out there, candidates. You're going to do great. I hope this helps. Whoops.
Thank you so much. This was so useful. And I think people are getting a petition together to get you in a workshop next year. So it's coming your way.
I love doing workshops. Also, yeah, first of all, role-playing, practicing negotiation scenarios can be really helpful to reduce your nerves when you get to the real situation. So
absolutely. Well, I think people are saying this is the best session of the day. So thank you so much. Hope you're going to attend some of the other sessions. And also you can probably reach out directly. You can reach out directly to all speakers. So you can always send a message to them and let them know, that you saw their session, and, ask your question there too. So thank you so much. Take care.